What some of us believe humanism to be and what the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago is about. We like to read some little quotes at the beginning of our programs today. I'm going to read the following. Humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance which affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. It stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethics based on human and other natural values in a spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. It is not theistic and does not accept supernatural views of reality. So there you have it. We do a wide variety of programming. We like to bring a lot of different people to talk to you about a lot of different topics, be it philosophy, art, science. Today's topic falls squarely in the history of the great city that we live in, Chicago. And John Holden will be presenting today. John is a longtime student of Chicago history and a board member of the Edgewater Historical Society. An award-winning public relations professional, John has served as Director of Public Affairs for the city's Department of Law, Director of Media Relations at DePaul University, as well as communication positions at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Chicago Public Schools. And I advanced one of his slides for him. John will be talking today about his book, Remembering the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and more specifically about the place that many of us drive by on Lakeshore Drive or DuSable Lakeshore Drive and go, oh yeah, the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And most of us are wrong about what we're looking at, so we're going to find out today what we are really looking at and what was there. So please join me in welcoming John Holden.
Thank you very much for the invitation this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Kept me out of church for one Sunday this month. So I'll start off by just talking a little bit about the Edgewater Historical Society. That is really the genesis of where this book came from. I am a board member there. It's one of about a dozen community-based historical societies in the city of Chicago, probably the most active and most robust. We do a wide array of programming, lectures, book clubs, and we also have a free museum that's open every weekend, Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 4. We're a completely volunteer-based organization, and this book really grew out of an exhibit that the Edgewater Historical Society opened up in 2016 to mark the 100th anniversary of the opening of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. We were planning to get that exhibit down a couple of years ago. Because of COVID, everything was kind of put on ice. So we're just kind of getting back to that idea of moving on to our next exhibit. And I thought it would really be a shame if we packed up everything we had in that exhibit and put it up in our storage room like we have done with so many other exhibits. So I proposed the idea of doing this book with the woman who was the main quarterback on that exhibit, Kathy Kemperly. It took a little bit of cajoling with her, but she finally got on board. And then when we reached out to the Arcadia Press company that does a lot of books on communities around the country, a friend of mine who was a very accomplished author of books like this told me it would probably be a year or more before I ever heard back from Arcadia. Don't take that personally. That's just the way things operate. To my surprise, they got back to me the very next day and said, oh my God, we can't believe no one's ever done a book on the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Let's get going. You got 6 months. So that was last October, just about a year ago right now. And I guess thankfully, because of the COVID lockdown, I had lots of time on my hand. My social life was basically put on ice. So the book came out in August. We turned it into the publisher in April. A few things about what the book is and isn't. It's heavily photo-driven, image-driven. We have about 225 images in the book, and also about 20,000 words of text. So we think the pictures really tell much of the story, but there's just such a wealth of information about the Edgewater Beach that it was really kind of impossible to fit it all into the book. So what you'll be seeing today is about 75 images that didn't make it into the book, but also tell you a number of stories that also weren't in the book or elaborate upon some of the stories in the book. So anyhow, what we're looking at here is a very general overview of the entire campus of where the Edgewater Beach Hotel was located. This aerial shot was probably from somewhere around the vantage point of Argyle Avenue, looking north. This would have been the late 1950s. You can see the rather large expanse of parkland on the between the hotel campus and the lake, and that was all lake fill that was constructed in the 1950s, starting in the early 1950s and concluding in 1957, when Lakeshore Drive was extended up to Hollywood Avenue, where it still currently terminates. The hotel itself, you can see on the left-hand side of the image, kind of about halfway up, you can see the kind of wedding cake shaped building. It's 19 stories tall. That's kind of obscuring the second tower of the building of the complex. That's just to its north. And then a little further north, beyond that little bit of green space, you see another tall building. Those are the Edgewater Beach Apartments. And I'll stop right here and just clarify what is what. A lot of people mistakenly believe that the Edgewater Beach Apartments were once part of the hotel. That is not the case. They were always apartments. They were built as apartments. They were built by the same team that built the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and more importantly, by the same architect, Benjamin Marshall of Marshall and Fox. So the Edgewater Beach Apartments definitely have a very close relationship with the complex, but they fortunately survived the wrecking ball. They were never being targeted for demolition when the hotel was doomed to destruction in the late 1960s. And one thing that the book also doesn't have is any color photos, so I'll just take this opportunity to share a handful of color images of the hotel complex. These are all postcards, by the way, and a quick word about postcards. The Edgewater Beach Hotel complex might have been the most popular subject for postcards in the history of the city of Chicago. There were literally millions of them produced over the years. Most of these were black and white images that were later hand painted. That was the typical way to approach the craft back in the day. Chicago was the leading center for the manufacturing of postcards, so maybe it was just only natural that the Edgewater Beach Hotel would be such a popular subject. But this gives you a great view of the complex from the vantage point of the lake. And this would have been the vantage point that a lot of people first got of the complex, because a lot of people arrived at the hotel via a boat. So on the left-hand side, you could see the taller of the two buildings that I just mentioned. The building on the left-hand side was the actual original complex, or the original structure that opened in 1916, and they had a big deadline to get the building done. It was constructed in just about a year's time, which is really a remarkably quick turnaround. It was booked to have delegates for the 1916 Republican National Convention, which was being held in Chicago that year. And lo and behold, they got the doors open in June of 1916, just in time for that event. The building on the left, that annex, was constructed in 1924. The initial hotel was such a raging success that they quickly realized that 400 rooms was not nearly enough for what they would need. So they got this annex up that contained an additional 600 rooms. And then connecting the two buildings was this really remarkable structure. It was sitting on top of an indoor parking garage, but it was a very beautiful structure, which you'll see a bit of in just a moment. This panoramic view is of, well, let me go back and just point out one or two other things. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see something on the lake there, and that was actually a theater stage. They had a stage built on a pier, and they presented theater and light opera right on the water. Theater on the lake is what I like to call it. The audience would sit on the revetment walls and tables that were set up along the revetment walls. And to the best of our detective work. We believe that arrangement existed for maybe about 10 or 12 years. Just behind that stage, you can kind of see a shorter building, and that was maybe the centerpiece of the whole hotel complex. It was a gazebo-like building that contained a restaurant called the Marine Dining Room, and this is what we're looking at right now. The Marine Dining Room was really kind of the nerve center for the action at the hotel, and it became kind of world famous because it was also the site for a lot of live broadcasting of big band and jazz music in the early days of broadcasting. The Edgewater Beach Hotel really made a name for itself as a center for presenting some of the best acts in music. There's a potpourri of major names in the business who appeared there from the earliest days. Some names you'd recognize still today. Among them would be like Benny Goodman at the tender age of 13, made his professional debut performing there. Bix Beiderbecke dropped out of college to take a gig at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Throughout the 20s and 30s, you had all the big names in music that were playing there. Maybe most notably Paul Whiteman, who is known as the King of Jazz. Xavier Cugat, the flamboyant Cuban band leader, was also a regular at the hotel over the years. And the radio station was something that really put the hotel on the map. The man who managed the hotel for the first 36 years of its existence, William Dewey, was really kind of a brilliant guy in a lot of ways. He really made the hotel what it was. He really, I like to call him like the Marshall Fields of the hotel business. He had an absolute passion for the place. It was kind of his baby. Although he had 4 sons of his own, he really poured his heart and soul into the hotel. The place was absolutely elegant and beautiful. It was the epitome of swank. It's the kind of place you could easily imagine like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers running around in the 1930s. It was beautifully designed, thanks to Benjamin Marshall. Marshall himself was kind of the driving force for getting the hotel built. He was the architect of many other buildings in the city of Chicago, including the Blackstone Hotel, which will open in 1909, also a very beautiful, elegant facility. He kind of felt, though, that Chicago really needed something like the Blackstone Hotel, but in a much more country club-like setting. So that's where the genesis of the Edgewater Beach came from. So not only was it a hotel, it was kind of like a country club. It had a golf course, it had tennis courts. Of course, it had access to the lake. They had a 1,000-foot promenade along the lakefront, which allowed for people who stayed there just to stroll up and down the waterfront, which was really quite a pleasurable activity, especially in the days before air conditioning. But let's get back to the Marine Dining Room. So this is the view. This is kind of a panoramic view from the entrance of the Marine Dining Room. So directly in the middle, there are stairs that descend down onto the main floor. That was not only used for dining, but they would open up the floor for dancing, and there was quite a bit of dancing that took place in that space over the years. And then on either side, you see a couple of wings with additional seating for diners who would then be able to look down on the main floor. The hotel opened its radio station in 1923, and it was constructed in a booth that was right off the lobby that also overlooked the Marine Dining Room. So the people in the control room of the radio station could make direct visual contact with the band leaders and coordinate the staging of shows and such. So really quite a lively space, and it played an important role throughout the history of the hotel. So the hotel itself was in operation for just about 51 and a half years after opening in 1916. And this is just another postcard view of the hotel. This one, I think, is probably especially floridly hand painted. But the marine dining room just took on a lot of different looks over the years. It got a number of makeovers, but it was always very chic and always very much up to the times of what the aesthetics were. So I referenced the structure that connected the two towers of the hotel complex, and this is a view of what came to be called the Passaggio. It was basically a nearly 200-foot long corridor that connected the two buildings, but Benjamin Marshall never did anything simple. He had to make every single space grand. So the Passaggio itself became kind of a grand place for strolling and promenading through the hotel complex. You can see it's kind of done in this very lovely Spanish Baroque style, had lovely furnishings and carpetings and draperies and so forth. And those were constantly being changed up to reflect the latest tastes and so forth. And then about halfway down the Passaggio, it was flanked by two magnificent lounges with these gorgeous cathedral ceilings. The one lounge had this stunning fireplace as its centerpiece. So it was a space that guests of the hotel could gather in and socialize with their friends and so forth. It was also, these spaces were also used for certain events like weddings and so forth. And I can't imagine a more beautiful place to have a wedding than a space like this, or the other lounge on the other side of the complex. This was the East Lounge. The other one was the West Lounge. And these basically sat atop what was the world's first indoor parking garage. It was a 200 space parking garage located between the two towers of the complex. The entire complex also featured a very substantial indoor shopping arcade, which fronted along both Sheridan Road, but could also be, all the shops could be accessed from the interior court of the complex. This is a photo probably from the 1950s of the very beautiful florist shop that was in business there throughout the history of the hotel. But above and beyond just beauty, the hotel was also really kind of the centerpiece for fun. It was probably a slightly hedonistic environment, but there were all kinds of clubs and restaurants within the hotel complex. Perhaps the zaniest was called the Yacht Club. It was on the ground floor of the complex, and you can see in the background there the sailor looking out at the open sea. That's actually Lake Michigan. That's how close this space would have been to the lakefront. The whole thing is done in total get-up to make you think you're on an actual ship. You entered into the restaurant on a little gangplank. When you got to a certain point on the gangplank, a ship's whistle would go off, and you were given permission to board. They had canvas ceilings and walls that could be made to vibrate to simulate wind coming in on the sails and so forth. So really kind of a very, very theatrical and fun experience. And one of the ironies, the Edgewater Beach Hotel closed in 1967. Coincidentally, that was the same year that Riverview closed in Chicago. So I think in one sad year, Chicago lost two of the biggest centers of fun and entertainment that it ever had. And it's occurred to me that in a way, the Edgewater Beach Hotel was really kind of like the Riverview for rich people. But it wasn't just rich people that went to the Edgewater Beach Hotel. There were any number of events that were held there: weddings, conventions, proms, birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, and everyone knew that it was the place where the rich and famous hung out. But I think what makes it so special to so many people still is that they had a chance to go taste that high life for maybe just one weekend in their life, and it's something that they kind of cherished for the rest of their lives. So I'll just randomly share with you a few images in no particular order. but I'll just comment on them. So this is an exterior view of the hotel, probably would have been from the mid-20s when the hotel was still under construction. The building in the background is the taller of the two towers, and I believe this is probably an image from before the final exterior coating of material was applied. It looks like a brick building there, and it was basically a brick building, but it was overcoated with a stucco-like material that kind of gave it that smooth surface. You can also see the entrance to the parking garage on the right-hand side there. And right above it is that gazebo-like building is that's the West and East Lounge structure that I talked about. And this is just a view of what the underground parking garage would have looked like. We all take it for granted that any building like this would have an indoor parking garage, but someplace had to be the first place to have one, and that, lo and behold, was the Edgewater Beach Hotel. This not very clear image is just a view of the terraces that surrounded the original building of the hotel. So from up above on that vantage point, you'd be looking north, and you could see the golf course and the tennis course that laid behind. Those trees there that you see in the background are right along the shoreline. And because the hotel wasn't located right in the heart of downtown, there was this issue of getting people back and forth from the hotel complex to downtown. They had a small army of vehicles available to them, motor coaches and buses and omnibuses and limousines, but they also provided access to downtown by boat. You could jump on a boat out in front of the hotel and zip down to Grant Park in about 10 or 15 minutes time. And then if you were in a real hurry, they even had a seaplane that would take you downtown for a cost of $10, which in today's money is about $125. So just to go back and talk a little bit more about the music, as I mentioned, the Marine Dining Room, or the Marine Room as it was sometimes called, was the year-round center for musical presentations at the hotel, but really the most spectacular venue for music was what they called the Beach Walk. It was located between the two buildings of the hotel. It had a 5,000 square foot white marble dance floor that you can see here. You can also see that it's located pretty close to the waterfront, although I have another picture that shows you a little more clearly how close it was. Here they have it set up for a seated audience, but I think most of the performances were actually just people out there dancing. This postcard image here shows the open dance floor. Another painted postcard here. And then this photo, probably from the 1920s, shows what the dance floor looked like when it was just absolutely thronged with revelers. One of the great stories I've heard since the book came out was the recollections of a friend of mine's stepfather, who's 95 years old, and he's an old boater in Chicago who's done the Mac race for like 60 years. And he told me great stories of like when he was a young man in the 1940s, he'd take his boat from Diversey Harbor and they'd drop anchor offshore of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. That was a very popular thing for people to do and just take advantage of the free music that was drifting across the water. And I think a lot of people in the city got that vicarious thrill, whether you're out on the water or even along the shoreline, within a half mile or so of the hotel itself. Just another quick picture of the Marine Dining Room. This is a view of it from what was probably the late 1920s. For a period of time, it was Mr. Dewey seemed to have a passion for palm plants, and it kind of became something like an elaborate palm room at the hotel. And this is the bandstand that graced the Marine Dining Room for a number of years. There's got a couple of pictures in the book of some of the greats that graced this particular bandstand. One especially interesting photo is of Lawrence Welk in 1939. He was really just starting to get his career going. I never knew this before, but his career, he was from North Dakota, I believe, but he made his name in Chicago, starting first at the Edgewater Beach Hotel and then moving on to an extended run at the Aragon Ballroom. Lawrence Welk was also the guy who gave Desi Arnaz one of his first professional starts, and that was also at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And that was in the late 30s. By that time, the Edgewater Beach already had a very solid name as being, one of the premier places for bands to play at. And this is just a view of that broadcasting studio I'd mentioned. This is where they would they had the control booth in this room. They also would do like live interview programs from here, and then they would do musical presentations that were just being conducted for the purpose of broadcasting them. So they had a grand piano in the room to help facilitate those presentations. And then how did the station get out on the air? Another very interesting aspect of the hotel is that they were kind of instrumental in getting the Zenith Radio Company off and running. The company itself was started by a couple of graduates from Lane Tech, my alma mater, I'm very proud to say. They started it in their parents' basement in a 3-flat in Uptown, but within a year or so, Mr. Dewey had learned of these guys, thought that radio could offer a lot to the hotel, so he invited them to bring their company onto the property of the hotel. This was undeveloped land at the time. So they built this little radio shack, literally a radio shack, where they basically were starting off by operating a ham radio-like operation. You can see the call letters up there, 9ZN, and the ZN allude to Zenith. So they were not only broadcasting from there, but they were also manufacturing radios. And they spent about a year or two doing that. They were such a tremendous success that they quickly outgrew the facilities and opened a factory that still remains at Ravenswood and Devon in Chicago. And this is what the broadcast antennas would have looked like around that time. Somewhat primitive, but it got the job done. The hotel also had its own in-house magazine that kind of provided a guide to guests on what was going on not only at the hotel, but throughout the city of Chicago. They published this magazine for decades. This copy here is from June of 1928. This artist rendering gives you a very nice view of the complex overall. You can see each of the individual structures, the passaggio and the lounges and the marine dining room there between the two wings of the shorter building, and then the lakefront stage as well. These pages from the magazine are from the 1950s, and I loved it because it's kind of like a walk back in time to all the great theaters that the city of Chicago once had. These are all the downtown theaters, I think only a couple of which still remain. This would have been, I think, from 1954, based on the movies that were showing. So again, there was a lot of synergy between the hotel complex and downtown. Just another page from the magazine that shows some of the restaurants that were popular in downtown at the time. I don't think any of those remain. So the Edgewater Beach Hotel was also, in addition to being a hotel, was a place for where a lot of people lived their lives. Most obviously were the Edgewater Beach Apartments. That building was built in 1928. It was always intended for permanent residence, and it's always served that role over the years. But in the years, the dark days of the Depression, the hotel had a lot of empty rooms as well, not surprisingly. So in the mid-1930s, they turned over 2 floors of the hotel for residential living. This is a view of the main entrance of the Edgewater Beach Apartments. That's still where the main entrance remains. Unfortunately, those grand colonnades above the entrance were removed some years ago. But otherwise, the hotel or the apartments remain very much like what they looked like all along. This is the lobby of the apartments, very beautiful, elegant space, lovely paneling throughout, and aside from the furniture, everything there still looks almost exactly the same more than 90 years after it opened. This is I think a Hedrick Blessing photo, just showing what a typical apartment in the Edgewater Beach Apartments might look like. This is kind of the, I would say, the glory days of the Art Deco movement. Very beautiful, elegant space. That's what they would envision most of their tenants would want to have. And like the hotel, the apartments also had an interior shopping arcade that offered both goods and services. They had a barber shop, a beauty shop, a very upscale market and wine shop, clothiers, drugstores, soda fountains. You really didn't have to leave the complex for very much if you lived there, and that's still true to a certain extent. Another view, the apartments also have an interior swimming pool, and with this kind of deck area that's often set up for lunches. That right now is undergoing a major restoration, but still all very much intact. This is just an advertisement from the hotel when they were trying to market the new apartments at the hotel. So this kind of gives you a sense for what the rooms would have looked like. They amended them somewhat and added kitchenettes to the apartments, but they very much appeal to, I think, a more mature clientele, maybe a lot of single people as well. And they advertised it as living in a very European-like environment that you really didn't have to cook. You had, after all, you had 6 restaurants within the hotel complex to take advantage of, or you could have room service, but you know, you really had a lot of different options in that regard. And there were a fair number of you had to have a fair amount of money to live in these places, and there were a number of prominent business executives who lived there. The head of Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, for instance, spent a lot of time there. This is just a very quick view of what Bryn Mawr Avenue would have looked like in the 1920s. The Edgewater Beach Apartments is the tallest building on the left-hand side in the background, but it really spurred the development of a lot of additional high-rise. What did I do there? High-rise units in the vicinity. So just I'll kind of pick up the pace here a little bit. This is what the area of where the hotel was built looked like originally. It was sand dunes and swamps, like most of the shoreline of Chicago would have been in its original form. They had to negotiate the actual boundaries of where the eastern boundary of the property would have been with the Park District, and they ended up getting access to a lot of land that was underwater as part of that deal, but they did not secure the riparian rights, which gave them control over what happened east of the complex, which ultimately that was what paved the way for Lakeshore Drive to have been extended and kind of cutting the hotel off from the waterfront. Just a view of what the complex looked like from the water. That's the original building. This might have been even before the second. This was probably before the second tower was built. And you can see a lot of boating and stuff going on, but there actually wasn't a beach when the hotel first opened. They had to build this 1,000-foot retaining wall, basically, to secure the property from being washed away by the lake. There really wasn't any beach there, but over the years, the natural forces of the lake allowed sand to start to accumulate and basically grow a beach over the years. And in that corner just to the left of the hotel complex, you can see the beach taking shape. This was probably from the mid to late 1930s. And then by the 1940s, late 1940s especially, the beach really got quite substantial. It was quite huge. And in a way, that kind of helped pave the way for the landfilling that took place. So it was 1947 that the Chicago City Council voted to create the land to allow for the extension of Lakeshore Drive up to Hollywood. And that work got underway in the early 1950s. This image shows that construction starting. This probably would have been like 53 or 54. I take that back, probably like 50 or 51. You can see they're kind of putting in pilings and creating a new hard shoreline up there towards the top of the image and starting to infill the area with new earth. And a lot of the earth that was used for this project was actually being excavated elsewhere in the city of Chicago for the construction of what's now called the Eisenhower Expressway. And it was 55 acres of land that was added. And this is what it looked like when it was finished. So it's obvious that the hotel took a slight hit and that it was no longer on the water's edge. So to compensate for that, they still very much wanted to emphasize fun in the sun. So they built a swimming pool where the golf course had been. And it wasn't just any swimming pool. It was the biggest swimming pool that had ever been constructed in Chicago. It was Olympic sized, and it was the scene for a lot of fun and crazy activity over the years. You had fashion shows there. You had beauty contests there. So it really remained a locus for the hotel's image over the next 15 years. This is a Christmas card that the hotel managers would send out to all its guests, showing even Santa Claus liked to hang out at the pool. There was a very brief, so Chicago is famous for having its lakefront completely accessible to the public. The Edgewater Beach actually did restrict its beach to people who were guests at the hotel, but people in the neighborhood used to hang out at the beach that was just adjacent to the property. That's what you're seeing there. And then just very quickly, a few words about the people at the hotel. I had mentioned Mr. Dewey before. That's him standing right behind the man in the center, the kind of distinguished gentleman with the graying hair. He managed the place from 1916 to 1952. He was also a part owner of the hotel, but he and his partners sold the hotel in 1949. He continued to manage it for another 3 years. He died within it 2 years after retiring, but he lived at the hotel for many years as well. This is a lady named Marley Stanton. She started in the kitchen at the hotel and worked there for the rest of the hotel's life. She was a German immigrant. She ended up marrying a man who was the head of the food service operation at the hotel. After the hotel closed, they went and took over the Swedish bakery in Andersonville and ran that. Their family ran it until that closed a few years ago. She's still alive in her mid-90s, and she provided us with a lot of wonderful stories that are included in the book. It's just another picture of someone who's working in the hotel kitchen, and the operation of the kitchen is something that kind of boggles the mind to even think about. They produce somewhere in the vicinity of 3,000 meals a day for the various activities at the hotel, the restaurants, the banquet dinners, the room service. Really a masterful operation, and the food quality was top drawer all the way. They were very well known for their salads. They published a book of the hotel's exclusive salad recipes. We have a copy of that at our museum. They also were very well known for their pastries. Just a quick photo of this is a photo that was donated to the museum. This was probably a young wedding couple posing for a photo out in the front of the hotel. That beautiful sign for the Edgewater Beach Hotel remains. Unfortunately, it's not in our collection, but it is at the Chicago History Museum. This is a view from a prom that was held in the late 1950s. This was the St. Gregory's High School prom. This is in what had been the Marine Dining Room, but in the 1950s, as part of this mania for all things South Seas, the Marine Dining Room was remade into Polynesian Village, and there's a beautiful 2-page spread in the book of an artist rendering of this new space that made you really think you were in Tahiti. Famous people, maybe the thing that made the Edgewater Beach Hotel most famous was because so many famous people were associated with the hotel. And in the book, you'll see people like Martin Luther King and Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Shirley Temple and Barbara Stanwyck and Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. They were all guests at the hotel. This man might have been the first to make his name at the hotel. It's Johnny Weissmuller, who another proud Lane Tech graduate. This was in 1922 when he first dazzled the world with his swimming capabilities at a meet that was held on the lake out in front of the hotel. He kind of shot to fame at that point. 2 years later, he started racking up gold medals at the Olympics, and then about 10 years later, he became famous all over the world as Tarzan in the movies. And this is a medal that was presented to Johnny Weissmuller by the hotel for his accomplishments. The crest of the hotel is there in that little shield in the middle of the medallion. This was actually something on display at a swimmers museum down in Palm Beach, Florida, that one of our museum members saw while they were visiting and took a picture of it and sent it back to us. Babe Ruth, he spent a number of days at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. This was the day he sank his famous called shot into the bleachers at Wrigley Field during the 1932 World Series, which the Yankees took in 5 games. I talked about the theater that was on the lake earlier in the presentation, but then in the late 50s, after Lakeshore Drive was extended, basically the beach walk dance floor was no longer suitable for live music. You really couldn't hear it very well over the roar of the traffic, but they erected an enormous tent that seated 950 people, and they did basically summer stock theater at the hotel for 6 years. The theater wasn't just any summer stock. They attracted many major names at their production. So some of the people who had performed there during that time included Mae West, Groucho Marx, Tallulah Bankhead, Steve Allen, Eve Arden, Tony Randall, Zero Mostel. I could go on and on. This lovely lady here is the famed actress Susan Strasberg. She was the daughter of Lee Strasberg, the founder of the Method School of Acting. This was from a production of George Bernard Shaw's Caesar and Cleopatra, and I believe that was in '59. But fame, there was also fame, and then there was infamy. And this lady here is responsible for what might have been the most infamous moment at the hotel's history. She was a woman named Ruth Steinhagen. She was an avid Cubs fan who really began obsessing about a baseball player named Eddie Waitkiss. He was with the Cubs for a number of years, and he was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. He came back for a game at Wrigley Field while he was staying at the hotel. He got a cryptic note while he was sitting in the bar to come see this young lady in her room. When he got up there and she opened the door and she let him have it with a shotgun blast to the chest, and let it be known that he'd been bothering her for a while. So this was her way of dealing with that. So in any event, she obviously had some issues. Mr. Waitkiss survived and resumed his baseball career. That incident became the basis for the story, The Natural, which became a movie in the 1980s with Robert Redford. I'm getting close to the end here, but another person who really kind of gave the hotel something of a notorious reputation in the 1960s was Jimmy Hoffa. The hotel went through a very big makeover in the early 60s in a bid to become more of a convention-focused operation. The Teamsters did a lot of business there. Jimmy Hoffa stayed there for extended periods of time in the presidential suite, which reportedly was going for about $1,000 a day back in the 60s, which is quite a sum of money. He was there while the Teamsters were in the crosshairs of the U.S. Justice Department, his famous battles with Bobby Kennedy, the Attorney General, and he was indicted while he was staying at the hotel, had an impromptu news conference out in front responding to the charges. And I'm sorry, this photo I can never get to be right side up, but it's kind of a cockeyed story. But along with the Teamsters, there were some other, maybe, shall we say, mobbed up elements that started hanging out at the hotel. This was a man named Fifi Buccieri. He had a birthday party in the summer of 1967 at the hotel. He, unbeknownst to him, was being waited on by a bunch of waiters who were actually undercover FBI men, and there was a big sting executed, something like you would imagine in the movies. And then just very, very quickly, there was a second hotel operated by the people who put together the Edgewater Beach Hotel. It was the Edgewater Golf Hotel, which was just outside Biloxi, Mississippi. It was kind of the winter home, if you will, for the clientele of the Edgewater Beach, and had all the same amenities that we had in Chicago, only on a much grander scale. An 18-hole golf course as opposed to a 9-hole golf course in Chicago. And you had extensive gardens, you had golfing, you had bridle paths that you could ride throughout the lands, and then also a lot of boating taking place on the Gulf. And then finally, the sad conclusion. So the hotel was definitely declining throughout the 1960s, although still doing a very robust business. But it had gone through this kind of corporate makeover. So I'm going to contrast here a picture of the hotel from its glory days. This is a lounge space in the 1920s. After this makeover, it's still got a very kind of austere, semi-corporate look in the late 50s, early 60s. But even during this time of decline, the hotel was really still encouraging a lot of additional development in the community. There were 3 motels built within a block or two of the Edgewater Beach Hotel in the 50s and 60s. These were more motel-style operations, but they were all kind of like feeding off the synergy of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. This complex itself was up around Catalpa and Sheridan Road, and only just came down about, I think, 5-10 years ago. Just a very quick view of what the scene on out in front of the hotel would have looked like, probably in the late 1950s. Whoop. And then the end, without much advance warning, actually with no advance warning, on December 22nd, 1967, the owners of the hotel announced that they were shutting down that day, and the guests of the hotel had to get out that day. The longtime residents of the hotel, who some of whom had been living there 30 years since it first became residential, were told they had 1 day to find other accommodations. So very sad ending to the whole operation. This is a waiter at the hotel taking in the dispiriting news 3 days before Christmas. And this is a view of the front of the hotel the day it closed. The sign up above the main entranceway there shows that there was still entertainment going on. George Gobel, I don't know if anyone remembers him. He was a Chicago-born comedian, kind of had this hangdog kind of persona. He was the most frequent guest on The Tonight Show, but he was also last entertainer to perform at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. I don't know if he got paid for that day. I don't think so, because most of the employees did not get paid what they were owed on the day it closed. And this kind of grainy photo from the Tribune is of another long-term resident of the hotel, Mrs. Kim, who was also an entertainer, just kind of saying goodbye. So the hotel was closed to the public, but it got one more brief shot at life. The following year, 1968, the hotel was leased to Loyola University to use as a temporary dorm while they were constructing some of their own dorm facilities. So these lucky co-eds got the chance to hang out at one of the world's most swank hotels during their college years. The presidential suite was used as a student lounge during that time. And then after that period, they had a big auction and just sold off everything that could be taken out of the hotel, from the ashtrays and silverware and linens to furniture and even fixtures. I think this might have been coming out of the aforementioned yacht club. It looks like some kind of porthole kind of thingamajig. There's still a wide amount of memorabilia available on the internet pertaining to the Edgewater Beach Hotel. I'm proud to say that the Edgewater History Museum probably has the largest collection in the world, and that's definitely something that made this book possible. This view of towards the end, I found on Facebook, actually. These are, after the auction was held, basically the hotel was left sitting fallow. It wasn't even really secured very well. A number of people, I've heard a couple of firsthand stories of people who were sneaking in there and just looking at the decaying grandeur of the place. These three characters got all the way up to the top of the hotel. They're standing on the roof of the hotel. And it's actually while the demolition is going on, if you look to the upper left-hand corner of the picture there, you can see the roof is starting to come down in the demolition process. So these guys were real daredevils to be out there. And the demolition, it started in early 1970. They thought it would take about 6 months. It was a company called the Boyus Excavation Company in Cleveland, Ohio, that got the contract. They priced it for a 6-month job. The place was so solidly constructed, it took 13.5 months to come down and nearly bankrupted the demolition company. We got even recollections. I've had so many people tell me that they were out there watching the demolition. It was really kind of a protracted funeral, if you will, for the entire complex. And I think on a lot of days you'd see people out there with tears in their eyes, just shaking their heads in disbelief that this place could be torn down. The property was sold off to developers who had visions for a complex of high-rise towers. Only one of those eventually ever got built. That's the Park Tower building that's currently standing. It's a tall, black, kind of monolithic-looking structure at roughly Sheridan and Balmoral Avenue. Just another image very near the end of the whole thing coming down. The job was wrapped up in April of 1971, so this year marks the 50th anniversary of the completion of the demolition. So with that sad news put aside, let's go back and just take one more last look at the hotel in its glory days. This is the main entryway into the complex as it would have looked in the 1920s. And, you know, again, just the whole world kind of passed through this portal into what was really one of the most remarkable places the city of Chicago and the country ever knew. And it only lasted for just over 50 years, but we still have the memories and we could all pretend we were there. So with that, I'll leave you with this this kind of classic postcard image of the hotel in its heyday. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was fascinating. As someone who's lived in Chicago for quite a while now, it's something I really never knew about, and it's just fascinating to see all of that. We're going to take a slight pause here, have a musical interlude, and pass the basket virtually for some of you. After that, we will have questions and answers with John, so please stick around for that. It is through your support that this society operates, both financially and the people who volunteer and give their time to the society. If you would like to make a financial donation, please, if you are in the house with us here, there's a basket in the back. There's also a QR code that you can scan. And online, you should be seeing a link that will allow you to make a donation. So we're going to pause for a moment, a little music, and then we'll be back with questions for John. Thank you. So we should be back. Thank you all who donated. We appreciate it. We are going to do questions and answers now. The way it works, if you are here with us, you're welcome to step up. We have a microphone over here. You can ask a question. You can also, if you prefer not to speak, you could pass me a question on a card. I'll be happy to ask on your behalf. Online, you should be able to put a question into the chat, and it appears on my phone. So I will be asking questions on the behalf of the people online. So with that, John, why don't you step back up? I'm going to get out of here and let you answer questions.
Okay. To the best of my ability, I'll answer the questions.
The first question, why did it close so suddenly? What happened?
Yeah, that's maybe an internal mystery, but the hotel had been sold a couple of times after its initial sale in 1949. It never quite had the benevolent ownership again, I would say. There were typically hotel chain companies that were buying it. I think the last sale was in 1962, and it was a highly leveraged one, so you had a new owner in there that was looking to wring as much money as possible out of the complex. Maybe they were overly ambitious in their goals, but at the same time, there was also a dramatic shift taking place in American society that maybe made a place like the Edgewater Beach Hotel a little less desirable than it might have been 10 or 20 years earlier. We all remember the hit the open road ads, go out and see the USA from your Chevrolet. So a lot of families that might have spent their vacations at the Edgewater Beach Hotel in the past were no longer prime clientele. So by the late 50s, early 60s, the hotel management decided they really had to kind of shift the focus of the hotel to a more convention-oriented space, and they did a big remodel of the hotel. A lot of those grand spaces that I showed early in the presentation, the lounges especially, were given these really bad makeovers and turned into very bland, banal kind of looking spaces. And then the convention business never really materialized in a significant way at the hotel. McCormick Place opened in the mid-1960s, so the center of Chicago was very booming convention business, which was much further south of the hotel, so it never really started generating the revenue there. So they ultimately wound up in bankruptcy. It was while they were in bankruptcy that they cut the deal to sell the land, and that's when the hotel was closed. But a lot of people say it was still doing a very respectable business right up till the very end.
Thanks so much for such an interesting talk. Can you talk about the effect of the hotel, and I guess apartments, but the hotel, on the neighborhood and how it developed, and then how did it change? What do we know about maybe the effect of the change of the hotel stopping so abruptly on the subsequent development of the community?
Sure. Well, the community Edgewater was founded as a community in 1886, 3 years before it was annexed to the city of Chicago, and it was an upscale kind of bedroom community for the most part. It was accessible through new rail service that had been installed in the late 19th century. And by the time the hotel was proposed and built, the area was pretty well built out and fully developed, mainly single family houses, but also a number of smaller apartment buildings, both small 3 flats and 6 flats, but also larger courtyard buildings. And it was an upscale, desirable community, so that I think the hotel complemented the community rather than led the community. But as I noted during the presentation, it also spurred the development of additional taller residential buildings, some of which still remain, in addition to the Edgewater Beach Apartments. And then, that was pretty well status quo until the post-war years. Originally, Edgewater was part of the Uptown community area. And if you're familiar with the story of Uptown, and I could do a few talks on that as a former longtime resident in Uptown, but Uptown after the war became first a a place where a lot of the grand old housing was chopped up to create housing for the crush of returning veterans. The whole nation was in a major housing crisis in the late 1940s, early 1950s. So these returning vets more or less came back and were staying in these grand old houses and apartments that were being cut up. And then once they moved on to start their families in the suburbs and such, the area became kind of a way station for wave after wave of immigration from both internally in the United States. There was the great Black migration from the south to the north. A lot of those people would have wound up in the Edgewater community. Also, there was a huge influx in uptown of Appalachian whites, and then over the years, every country in the world is probably represented by the immigrant groups. So substantially the Vietnamese following the end of the Vietnam War, other Southeast Asians, Cambodians, Laotians, certainly Latinos, Central Americans and Mexicans, Nigerians. So it was a constant receiving station, if you will, and the Kenmore Winthrop corridor, which is just west of Sheridan Road and just west of where the hotel was, saw a substantial socioeconomic decline in the years after the war. That probably didn't help the image of the hotel either. The area kind of became somewhat dangerous. There was a spike in crime and so forth over the years. So that whole situation has been completely reversed in the years since like the late 1980s, early 1990s. So once again, the area, it still remains very diverse economically and racially, but it's a very stable and safe community right now.
I'm going to combine a couple questions, one that's from here in the house and one from online, and and I'm going to add my bit to it. The geography of what changed with Lakeshore Drive, what happened, why, did people fight against it, and did the hotel actively lobby to prevent that, knowing that it was probably going to affect their business significantly?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure that I have a definitive answer to that, but I think really the answer was no. Ironically, and this is in the book as well, one of the residents at the Edgewater Beach Apartments was Mayor Martin Kennelly, who took office in 1947. He was a wealthy businessman in the moving business, and he was kind of a reformer who was promising to clean up city government, and it just kind of shows history keeps repeating itself there. Kennelly became mayor the year they voted to extend Lakeshore Drive, and I haven't seen anything that suggested he actively fought against it. I think it was more or less, destined to be. It was in the works that Lakeshore Drive would continue to extend northward. It's ironic, though, that since 1957, when the Hollywood exit opened, nothing more has happened in those 60 plus years. So there's continual talk about maybe extending Lakeshore Drive all the way up to the Evanston border, but I don't want to give anyone from Rogers Park or North Edgewater a heart attack and suggest that might actually happen.
Can you tell us more about the Edgewater Historical Society and where exactly is the museum?
Sure, thanks for that. Yeah, our museum is located at 5358 North Ashland Avenue, so it's basically on the southwest corner of Balmoral and Ashland, which is just a half block west of the heart of the Andersonville Commercial District. We're in an old firehouse that was donated to the museum by the city of Chicago. The Historical Society itself is 33 years old. We grew out of the old Edgewater Community Council, which no longer exists. But they started in '88 with the goal of building appreciation for the community of Edgewater. We have a free museum, as I'd mentioned, that we've continually operated for nearly 20 years. It's open, like I said, to the general public Saturday and Sunday afternoons. This weekend, we're open all day yesterday and today for Open House Chicago. We had over 200 people come by yesterday. We hopefully we'll have a nice turnout this afternoon as well. So we're focused on Edgewater history, but the history as it maybe affects the larger city of Chicago as well. Right now we have an exhibit, the remnants of the exhibit on the hotel, but then 2 other exhibits, one on the Chicago conspiracy trial. One of our board members' mother was one of the jurors in that trial, and this exhibit is based on her notes and personal recollections from that very, very momentous trial in American history. She was maybe the person most responsible for the defendants being exonerated on appeal. And then we also have another exhibit about the impact of Chicago's lake level, the rising and falling of Lake Michigan, and what it's been doing to the shoreline of Chicago, and what the city's been doing to try to minimize the damage. And we're always looking for people who are interested in history to get involved. And again, we're a all volunteer free museum for the public.
Somebody online sent in a comment saying that our family lived nearby and Dad took us to a very special evening to hear Edith Piaf,
Wow.
her favorite singer. So
Wow.
someone passing on their recollections.
There we go. I've got another name to add to the list of the legends who played there.
Somebody else says, fabulous talk. Where can I buy an autographed book?
Right here.
So
You can get them at the museum. It's also available online. Authors make very little money when books are sold online, but if you want to meet the authors, I'll be doing additional talks over the next several months as well.
From here in the house, somebody is asking competition for the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Did they compete with the downtown hotel, say the Palmer House?
Probably, but again, the Edgewater Beach was really kind of a unique experience in Chicago. It was not just a hotel, but you were actually kind of going to like this country club, if you will. And the other hotels, certainly like the Empire Room at the Palmer House, was also fairly well known for the music it presented. I didn't really get a chance to go into one other aspect of the hotel that really flourished in the 30s and 40s. In addition to the music, they put on these utterly mind-boggling floor shows, and with dancers, with something like out of a Busby Berkeley musical, where you'd have lines of chorus girls going every which way, and just spectacular dancing that was presented there. And many of the acts, there were two ladies who ran the troops over the years that became fairly well known, Dorothy Hild and Dorothy Dorbin, and they would do these thematic things like the Arabian Nights, and they'd bring in camels to be part of the floor show. So there were only dribs and drabs of information that seemed to remain on everything that went on there, but you really definitely got a unique experience when you went to the Edgewater Beach Hotel that couldn't be replicated in a lot of the other hotels.
The radio broadcasts, where would people hear them? Was it just Chicago that was hearing it? Was it nationwide?
Well, initially with the early days of radio, obviously the reach was not that great. But definitely throughout the Chicago and I would guess, throughout the Midwest environs. But the radio station at the hotel only existed for until the late 1920s. Through a variety of business developments and so forth, they ended up merging and they closed their own station. They did resurrect it again in the 1950s, but by that point, the brand of the Edgewater Beach Hotel and music from the Marine Dining Room was so strong that it was taken over by NBC and nationally broadcasted on the NBC radio network through the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
In the museum, do you have a catalog of record of the proms that were held there? Because in my high school, it seems to me we had a prom there. I wasn't there, but
I wish such a record existed, but I don't know if all the business records from the hotel exist anywhere in the world. I tend to doubt it. Our efforts to try to track these things down were absolutely fruitless. What we do have at the museum is a lot of material that was donated to us by individuals mainly, because we're kind of like the last resting spot for all this stuff. No one has really ever brought in anything like the business records, and I suspect these companies that were a little bit fly by night that had final ownership of the hotel probably did not keep any of their records. So one can only begin to imagine like how many thousands of guests or millions of guests might have stayed at the hotel over the years. How many meals were sold. I mean, all kinds of data that we'll probably never be able to reconstruct, unfortunately. But if anyone knows of anyone out there who has it, we'd love to have it at the museum.
Do we know why the original owners sold? I mean, it seemed like it was a going concern.
Yeah, it was privately held, and really there were 5 main owners of the hotel when they started business in the teens. These gentlemen, actually, one of the owners died within the first few years after the hotel opened, but their interests were passed down to their family members. So it was following World War II. They were really down to just Mr. Dewey as one of the original owners. He was getting up there in years, and basically the heirs of the other founders decided it would be better to just cash out, if you will.
A question from online. Someone asks, they said, I believe the Anna Held Cafe was located in one of the buildings.
That's correct.
Does it still exist today?
Yes, that space still exists in the Edgewater Beach Apartments. And you can go in there and get a cocktail. And I'm not sure what their hours are right now. In the wake of COVID, it was closed up for a while, but I think they are starting to gear back up.
Also, an online question, did the hotel management's desire to foster a country club atmosphere have any relation to the existence of a real country club, the Saddle and Cycle Club, which is just to the
Just
north?
to the south.
To the south.
Yes, yeah. Actually, the Saddle and Cycle Club, we address this in the book. It preceded the hotel by nearly 2 decades. That opened in 1895. And it never had any formal affiliation with the hotel. They were neighbors, so I think, if anything, kind of the swank pedigree of the Saddle and Cycle Club helped draw the intended audience up to the Edgewater Beach Hotel. There was an Edgewater Country Club that was separate from Saddle and Cycle, a few blocks from where the hotel was, but the hotel really kind of took over so much of that institution's rationale for being that it closed within about 10 years of the hotel opening.
And the last question, partially online and from here as well. Finish us out with the geography. Remind us what's standing where the hotel used to be, and sort of a landmark would be the apartments. Where was the hotel relative to the apartments? So next time we drive down Lakeshore Drive, what are we looking at, and what would have been there?
All right. Well, as you're just 1 block from the northern terminus of Lakeshore Drive at Bryn Mawr, the Edgewater Beach Apartments still stand in all their glory. 20-story building, roughly. The famous pink color is kind of a good visual cue that you're looking at something special. That is at the northern end of where the hotel complex was. The hotel's southern boundary was at Berwyn Avenue, which is 5300 North. So basically 3 blocks south of where the Edgewater Beach Apartments are located. The large black tower that I'd mentioned, that was the main structure put up on the footprint of where the hotel had been, is roughly at Balmoral Avenue or 5400 North. And then they've put up several other buildings, high rises, on the footprints of where the hotel complex was. So you have probably several thousand people living on the land where the hotel had stood. And I still haven't heard, but I suspect that the ghosts of some of the activity that went on at the hotel maybe reverberates a little bit in the in these buildings. Although I know I shouldn't be saying things like that to the Ethical Humanist Society. So. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was fascinating. A lot of fun for those of us here in Chicago to get a little more history about our city and the neighborhoods and the fun that was had here. So we're about to finish up our day, and thank you, John Holden, for a great talk. Next time I go down the drive, I'll be looking to see what was there. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.